Well, I'm Rick,
And I'm Eric.
and we are your no-nonsense wealth management hosts.
Welcome to our show.
Eric, you know what? It is springtime. We love the NCAA brackets. Boy, exciting games last night, although poor Bob Huggins that used to be at UC just got crushed again but who's going to beat University of Kentucky? I mean,
They call it March Madness for a reason. And I think Kentucky showed last night. I'm pretty sure they're the team to beat still.
I'm going to tell you what, that's impressive. Somebody gave me a little stat yesterday I wasn't aware of, that the tallest team per player in the NCAA is
Kentucky.
And when they compared UK against the NBA teams, they were number 2 against all NBA teams. So that tells you what John Calipari is doing down there, and, hey, more power to him.
I guess height does make a difference in basketball.
And that game, it seems to. When you're playing head and shoulders above everybody else, nobody else really has a chance unless you can shoot threes from another zip code.
Yep.
Because you got to shoot up and over, and you don't get many second chances.
You don't. You know, UC gave up a good fight. We're here in Cincinnati, so UC gave up a tolerable fight at the end, and they didn't come out victorious. But
respectable, and Xavier did well against Arizona, but fell by the wayside.
Yep.
Still respectable. I'm a UD fan. I saw UD fall in, the 32.
Yep.
But they put up a good game. So, I mean, it's exciting. I just love this time of year. I love the camaraderie and the conflicts and the whole bit.
Not too many people can say they've had four college teams in their area get to the NCAA or just even in the tournament.
Yeah.
You have UK, Louisville, UC, Xavier, and Dayton all within I think it's a 150-mile radius.
Yeah.
There's not too many people that can have that many teams in their area be dancing at the same time.
Well, it could be said that since we do have these cold winters, that we got really nothing else better to do.
Play basketball inside.
Yeah, so the weather's, you may hear a little in my voice. I apologize. Change of season. I am doing much better. I went to an allergist, and the Bernstein, John and Dr. John Bernstein, great doctor, and they gave me some things that have changed this. I've had this upper respiratory sinus thing in the change of season for 20 years. I get the infections, take the antibiotics. Well, last fall I went and finally saw them, and they diagnosed me and gave me something, and I'm doing better, but I still got you hear the bronchitis. Yeah. So, I mean, but that's a whole lot better than having a full-blown infection again.
That's what it is.
So making progress, moving forward.
That's what it is each day.
It is. And it makes it a little more challenging when I'm, I've got all the speaking that I do. Had 3 speaking engagements. Well, I had a couple presentations, and I had started that's the second week at UD.
Yep.
That I teach up in the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. So I had a lot of talking I had to do, just 2 hours, and then turn around to give a presentation on, because our insurance partner couldn't make it.
For long-term care last night?
Yeah, long-term care alternatives. So I think I held up well, but at the end of that, I was done.
Yep. Time to sit on your couch, maybe drink a cold one and watch basketball. Happy Friday. It's Friday.
That was it. TGIF. Well, we are focused here, Eric, on the entirety of the process, that end-to-end, kind of like Steve Jobs created an Apple, and we've done that and just transferred that into the world of finance.
Mm-hmm. And it's, when we talk about the entirety of financial planning, it's really 4 pillars, or, we call it 4 pillars, call it 4 pieces of the pie, and it's all 4. It's wealth management, it's your money, it's your insurance, it's your taxes, and it's your estate planning. However, on the wealth management side, that's where that's where we spend our day.
It is, and that's making sure these pieces work together. The whole concept of transparent wealth management is understanding what you have and what role it plays, understanding what you're paying and what it's doing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get those things from your advisor, you should be getting it. We use a holistic approach, and as you mentioned, we're integrating these pieces together so they function as opposed to the alternative, which is dysfunction. And there's enough challenges in the world of financial planning and retirement planning and wealth management to have, those pieces, those 4 pillars not working well.
And it can quickly spiral. So, that's the wealth management. If we have the taxes, it is tax season. We're here. We got, 3 weeks left to either file your taxes or file for an extension. depending on which one you prefer. So we do, our partners.
And efficiency is different than, planning is different than preparation. We've got the insurance, the risk management, know what you're paying, make sure you got the right coverages, and make sure you're paying a fair price. We see that a lot when those insurance audits take place that our partners do, that people don't have the right coverage. They just bought something out of the box they saw on TV with a cute little Geico character, or
they don't understand what they bought, what the difference
Flo.
is.
Who's that? Flo from the Progressive? Or the, what was the guy from Allstate? Deep voice guy. I mean, they're funny commercials, but, the reality is it's not funny if you take a hit and on the other one, the farmers. So here's what you think. You got this big pond. Kid goes jump in. It's a little miniature pond.
A little pool.
Those are all humorous. But the reality is, you need to be looking at that and check them every couple of years, because maybe you're not having bad experiences, but maybe the whole region did, and your premiums went up and another company didn't. So it's good to be working with, in our opinion, independent. Like we're independent in the wealth management side. We think that's an advantage. And finally, the caboose is not the last, but not the least.
It's the estate planning. It's the last pillar. Could be one of the most important pillars, and it's really do your proper estate planning today. So we work with both estate planning attorneys and elder law attorneys. This is you've worked your career, you've saved your money, you've grown your assets, you've accumulated assets. Make sure everything's in order, so when that day comes, your loved ones get that. They get your money, they get your assets, they get your house. A good chunk of it doesn't go to the courts or hospitals or attorneys. So it's very easy to sit down and do a plan for your estate. Problem is a lot of people don't do it. So we work with estate planning and elder law to make sure it is in place, because that day will come. We just don't know when.
And since we're on that topic, the show is educational in nature, Eric, as opposed to being advice. So please don't take it as advice. Doesn't constitute that, or tax advice, legal advice. We're not attorneys. We work within the world of tax efficiencies, but we're not tax preparers. We just 32 years of doing this, and between us almost 40 years.
Yep.
It's not what we focus on. So consult with qualified financial, legal, or tax people or real estate prior to taking any action. And the opinions that we express today are purely ours. They're not our broker-dealer NPC. We are duly registered. We're registered investment advisors, as well as under a broker-dealer arrangement. So we are really the department store of financial services in that sense.
Yep.
Convenience. And some of the statements we make, we do use demographics in that. We pull that from HS Dent. That's nobody has a crystal ball. Can't foretell the future, but it's amazing how much that when you look at the macro trends of what comes out of that, it's amazing to me how much matchup there is.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an interesting topic today, and we would welcome you to send us your questions. We can address those at the end of the show. If you email us at info@straighttalkcleardecisions.com, info@straighttalkcleardecisions.com. We'll be able to pick those up, or if you tweet those to us, we can pick them up.
At Ricktirement, RIKTIREMENT, or on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook, write a question on the Facebook page, and it's Rick Saylor Financial, RIK, and we can go ahead and address those in the last segment of our show today.
So this topic is a good topic. I think it's one that, there's a lot of dimensions to this, but, planning for retirement what ifs, and how to protect your savings from unwanted financial surprises. The reality is there are enough things we know about, that we need to be focusing on to get the fundamentals. And if we are prepared then in the basics, which we'll cover a lot of those and maybe some that aren't so basic, then, when life throws us a curve, we can adapt a little better.
Yep.
Be a little better prepared, because I love that classic definition, Eric, of what good luck is, which is preparation meeting opportunity. And that's really, I think that's the theme for today's show. So we're going to be covering down through a lot of these, but, I look at what would happen. Right now the economy seems to be roaring, but, the stock market is at all-time highs. And, let's just kind of paint this scenario where the economy looks like it's roaring, the stock market's right, and we're healthy. Well, then it's easy to overlook the what ifs when you're planning for retirement. But what if we saw, like we saw in 2008, the stock market plunges by 50%. Would that cause you to have to stay on the job for another 5 or 10 years? Would it cause you to have to stay in the workforce longer than what you really want to?
Or what if you or your spouse's health suddenly took a turn for the worse and you're now facing $120,000 a year long-term care expense? Is this something you thought or you planned for, 5 years ago?
Or what if taxes shoot through the roof and it significantly reduces your monthly income, the lifestyle that you had planned to have in retirement, and now that's not a reality because it's eroding too much?
Or what if you simply live to be 95 years old and you only plan to live to age 90? Would you completely run out of money in retirement? Rick, here's my point, or here's our point, I should say. I'm not reaching here. These are all very real scenarios, and we see these things. We've seen each one of these happen, people walking through our doors. And it's not, it can't happen to me. It's going to happen to somebody, and if you haven't planned for it, you're hoping, again, that it doesn't happen to you.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I've been around a little longer than you, but if you've been around long enough, things can go wrong. And when they do, it completely changes and can turn your life upside down in a heartbeat. So the time to plan for unwanted surprises is not during the chaos. That's not the time to buy insurance either. The time to plan is now. Start looking at that ahead, anticipate what could potentially go wrong. I like to call it the worst case scenarios. If we go into a situation or into this plan with a worst case scenario, then we know the very worst that can happen. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. And find out, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about today on the show, is what you can do now to prepare for the unexpected in retirement. So we're going to reveal the most common what-if scenarios in retirement and what you can do now to protect everything you work for, and that's all coming up. So, as we kind of break this down, again, this is a product of preparation, I think. I know sometimes it seems like we're beating this drum. You're like, hey, I already did that financial plan. I did this, I did that. I don't want to get that back out of the drawer. I just want to leave it alone because I did that once.
Yeah.
The reality is you may think at some point in time where you have this right. Well, then the rules change. Taxes go up. They start taxing in a different way. Mm-hmm. The market. I look at this on the stock market. A couple Mondays ago was an anniversary. Mm-hmm. It was the 6th anniversary of the longest bull run, in modern time here of the stock market. And not running on good fundamentals, though. Mm-hmm. We understood, you've heard us talk about our economy in the United States is driven, our GDP or gross domestic product is almost 3/4, 2/3 of it for sure, something like 70%, is consumptive spending. So consumption is important in our society, and we really drive the world in that sense.
And that's us as consumers buying and spending money.
Buying and spending. And 46-year-olds, they say 46 to 50 in demographics, but let's just say 46-year-olds, keep it simple. The more 46-year-olds we have, the higher the tide's going to rise. So, for example, the baby boom generation, and I broaden that definition because if you look on a chart, people born between 1932 and 1964 number somewhere in about the 92 million. Well, that wave, as we started in 1982, we started turning 46. The building and buying of houses and the building and buying of cars were at all-time highs. And our economy roared, and we extended a lot of credit. We have been losing 46-year-olds and a decline on the birth cycle for the last 5 years, and it continues for the next 5 years. So when we predicted with a reasonable amount of accuracy, when the market was rising and the shakeouts in the 2000, and then we looked at that second wave up, we said sometime in the late 2000s, early 2000, we're going to see a downturn, and it looks like 50% because that's what showed up on our graphs. And that's exactly what happened. Now, I could also understand that on an arithmetic graph, in those charts, how the Dow hit 14,000 because we had more 46-year-olds. It's a little hard to understand as that's been declining for the last 5 years that the Dow is now trading, which is an index you can't directly invest in, We got a stock market that's riding at an all-time high at 17, almost 18,000.
Yeah, it hits.
And on what? Stimulus.
We printed a lot
distortions.
of
Distortions, low interest rates. So we could be in a very scenario where that in regards to the market, that the stock market's overvalued. And we're starting to see a little more stress here as the dollar gets stronger. The Federal Reserve, starts dialing off some of their stimulus, and we start to see a stronger dollar, which made us less competitive as an exporter. And at the same time, Eric, we have the all-time low on interest rates, and we know when interest rates go up, which eventually they will, we just don't know how much and when. We know they're going to go up. What does that do to the bond market?
It could be it's not going to be a fun. Let me put it. It's not going to be a fun day in the bond
But the
market.
fundamentals are when interest rates rise, the bond yields drop.
And when in a falling interest rate environment, that is very rewarding for bondholders. That's what bondholders have seen the last 12 years. Interest rates have been falling, bonds have been performing. Well, now we're on the other side of the coin. When interest rates rise, bonds typically do not perform as well.
So what if we're in a situation where we have a diversification dilemma? We have dysfunction. Because what typically you say, hey, when stocks go up, bonds typically fall.
Or stay flat.
And when bonds go up, stocks typically fall. Well, what happens if we've got them falling in concert? Because interest rates are going up, and it's causing the stock market contributing to a fall to come back to a pullback, because we have not seen volatility. Mm-hmm. Volatility in the market, that choppiness, and you can measure that, in what they call the VIX, has been benign for the last year and a half or 2 years. But mark our words here, it is coming back. Just like gravity is to nature, it's natural and it's unnatural not to have it. But again, these are days and times we live with stimulus where it distorts the market, but we're going to start to see that come back.
Yeah. With the U.S. being the biggest consumer really in the world, we spend more money than any other country. We're coming off our stimulus as the other countries, specifically Europe, is starting to stimulate their economy. So the question is their printing going to have the same sort of effect that we had here in the United States, and how is it going to affect their market in the emerging markets?
Well, we have 12 items that we think you shouldn't do, and we're gonna get through as many of those as we can today, and hopefully we can get through all of them and treat them all right. So be sure and call our line here, 513-454-9999. If you want to call in with live questions at the end of the show, Brad can take those on his end, 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Or email us at info@straighttalkcleardecisions.com, or tweet us, which is @RickTirement.
Yep.
And that's RickTirment. It's kind of clever. So anyways, send those to us. We'll answer those on the air and do that in the last segment of the show. You're listening to the Straight Talk Clear Decisions radio show with your no-nonsense host, Rick Saylor.
And Eric Hamburg.
Money is an awesome thing if you know how to handle it, the joy it brings.
Hey, Rick Saylor here. Have you considered the options for maximizing Social Security? 3 things I can tell you about it. It cannot legally go broke. It's an all-or-something system, and smart planning involves strategically integrating this with the rest of your income choices. Don't make the $100,000 mistake by not planning appropriately. Consider retirement income, survivor, and spousal benefits, because there's 81 options for couples and only 9 for singles. Options and strategies like file and suspend, or claim now and claim more later. The difference between age 62 and age 70 is 57% more income for life. So be sure and ask your advisor today about Social Security planning.
Rick Saylor, smooth financial sailing for the best part of your life.
Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Eric. And, we are on this topic, and I think it's going to be a good topic, planning for retirement, the what-ifs, how to protect your savings from unwanted financial surprises. And one of the best things to do is to have a plan. To have a plan, revisit the plan. We've got 12 items here we're going to discuss. Well, the first one, let's hit a couple of these here. Don't be complacent. And I'll even throw this other one in, don't get discouraged. Well, one of the best ways to do that is, prepare for the look ahead. Look at a worst case scenario. Prepare for the storms. Now, we've just had this, not as bad as it was in 2014, but February was pretty cold.
Very.
Was it the fourth coldest on record for us? But when we look up in the Northeast, some of these storms absolutely shut down the Mid-Atlantic region of the U.S. So I begin to think how people would significantly how they would experience a significant financial storm, and how that would impact their retirement plan. So, for example, do you know what would happen to your retirement comfort if the stock market of your portfolio lost 40 or 50%?
Or what would happen if you or your spouse went into, a long-term care situation where you now have to pay $120,000 a year for care?
Or how about this? You never do know when this is going to happen or when it could, but how about if you or your spouse died suddenly, leaving the survivor with a mortgage and a low income or other exposed, risks? So, here's how we take a look at this. One of the ways not being complacent is that you stress test your financial plan.
And you do it in times when it is beneficial that if you can make changes, you can. I mean, think about it for a second. When do you buy car insurance? Well, before you get in your car, not after you had an accident. When do you typically buy life insurance? Well, you buy life insurance before you pass away. Because if you waited until you got in that car accident and then you purchased car insurance, well, guess what? It's going to be very, very expensive for you. Translate that to retirement planning. You don't plan for retirement once you're in retirement, because now you're going to have very little options to choose from. You do the planning prior, so when you get there, you're ready. You've done the planning, you've done the preparation, you have everything in order. So it's planning is crucial in a market like now, when we've had a nice run in the market for the last 5 or 6 years. We can now start to, decide, well, what am I trying to do with my retirement? What am I trying to do with my money? Am I trying to make it grow and pass it on to kids? Or do I actually need income off of it? And today, to start making those changes, that's when it is, not when the storm already hits.
Right, and you know how many people we've seen in the last 6 years, a lot of them have not been in the market. They've been largely in cash because cash positions, because they've said, hey, I don't understand the dynamics of this market, and this is really weird. It's paranormal. And they're right. This is really like the 1930s, just with new financial tools that the Fed's using. And that's a different show altogether. But, when we look at that, we see a lot of people that, because the dynamics are different, they've been sitting in cash because they just don't understand it. So, getting too conservative too early is financial suicide on the installment plan. Because if real inflation is running at really 3 or 4%, and we use 4.22 in our plans. Mm-hmm. And if you want to refer back to that, there was a show a couple weeks ago that we did on real inflation and how that it's averaged since they started tracking, 3.3, and a lot of financial people use 3. But it's like the man who drowned in an inch of water. That's not what he drowned in. It's when you take inflation from the 1960s to now, it's been 6%.
Yep.
Yes, it's changed. And the question is, when you're retired, what's inflation going to be? Well, we don't know. So you got to plan for the kind of those worst case scenarios. And I think since we're in a very benign period right now, just like the volatility in the market is fairly benign, doesn't mean it doesn't exist anymore. It's
just being hidden. It's being masked by other phenomena that haven't happened before.
Yeah, and if you want to understand that demographics, we keep referring to that, but you can go onto our website, straighttalkcleardecisions.com, and look back. There's a long winter season ahead by the Dent Research Group. It's about a 9-page read, and it's very good. Mm-hmm. Very good. You can get that on there and maybe give you an idea of how that we're applying that. And I'm going to tell you what, when I think about this, there's just so many things. We mentioned them kind of, we'll drill down on these, but think about the things when we're stress testing a plan, Eric. We're looking at, somebody's inflows and their outflows, what their budget looks like. We're looking at their current portfolio, the kind of risk-reward relationship they've got there. And then we've got their vision, values, and goals, because everybody's financial plan, no two people, they're like fingerprints. Everybody's got one, but no two are exactly the same. And then we test that against inflation, against taxes, against volatility in 10,000 combinations over the last 30 years. And it spits out a probability of success or could be failure, not a guarantee, but it gives you an indication with those variables and says, okay, now maybe this starts to fall short. What am I going to do different? Well, there's only a handful of things you have to choose from.
Yep.
You can work longer. You can save more. You can take more investment risk. You can cut your standard living in retirement or cut what the kiddies are going to get
That's right.
and your legacy. So that's it. So, think about this. One of the things we use in our plans, I think, is just had this discussion, and on a regular basis we have this, but, they say, well, where do you pick this age? How do you determine how long I'm going to live? I think a lot of people may be simply underestimating. We say if you're going to be conservative, I think most of our plans reflect, 93 for the gals and 90 for the men? Mm-hmm. And if you really want to be conservative, you better be using 100.
And we'll show age 100, not because we think you're going to live there, but again, this is something we don't know. No one knows how long they're going to live. And we want to show you what can happen if you do live too long. And do you have the assets, do you have the income to cover that gap?
So, the best surprise is no surprise unless it's a pleasant one. But, most people are really looking at enough money typically over the next 10 or 20 years. But what about the next 25 or 30 or even 40 years? Now, there's where it gets a little sketchier. Mm-hmm. So, we're firm believers. That's our training. That's our background, in financial planning and using comprehensive dynamic tools. We a financial plan, if you haven't done one, you haven't revisited one, in the last couple of years, that's a serious faux pas. And if you want to, again, don't be complacent. That's your first action item. It should be your New Year's resolution. We had a show on that too, didn't we?
We did.
So it's one of those things, okay, well, let's start out and let's look at that. That's a system because it's like a financial GPS. It's not going to tell you how to get back on track, but it certainly tells you that you just went down the wrong road.
Correct. And I think, obviously, our background coming from the financial planning side, it's important for us to understand where each and every one of you are coming from. And more importantly, it's us being realistic with you. It's saying, hey, you can do this, or maybe you can't. And this is what you have. These are the changes you have to make today in order to be successful. Because at the end of the day, you don't retire to go backwards in your standard of living. You retire to enjoy your retirement, to maybe travel, maybe spend time with grandkids, maybe garden more. So we're going to be upfront and realistic with you and say, hey, if this is truly what you want to do, hopefully you're good. And if not, these are the changes you have to make today in order to live that successful retirement life.
So, if you're going to run out of money, potentially, wouldn't you want to see that ahead of time where you can do something and chart a different course?
That's right. So that's when you're working. If you haven't,
your margin of error is wider.
That's right, and you can save more, or you could retire later. But if you've already retired, guess what? You can't retire later because you're retired.
And do you really want to go back to work at a job that's going to pay you less? Now, I understand there's a lot of ramifications and implications in here that we can't really touch on. But if you really hate your job, let's face it, you're losing life every minute and every second you're there. But apart from that, what we see, how many times have we seen, Eric, when somebody's plans, they say, this is what my ideal life looks like. This is my ideal dream realized. And I want to go out at such and such an age. But if we just move that, if we just slide that from 62 up to, say, 65 or 66, that their plan goes into the positive territory. Because they're earning, it's the highest earning years.
Yep.
They're maximizing Social Security with a pay-in, if they're covered under that. They're optimizing their retirement because they're saving more. And they're not drawing down on their assets because, again, that longevity thing comes into play.
Yep.
So, those are all key factors, and we can put those into a plan and, again, move the pieces around.
I mean, think about it. If you're a spouse or husband or wife and you work an extra 2 years, and let's just say between the both of you, you both make total, say, $150,000, you times it out 2 years, that's $300,000. If you weren't working, you might have drawn half of that out of your investments in order to keep up with your standard of living. So just by working a few extra years, to you personally, it might not seem like it's going to be a big deal, but at the end of the day, that could be the difference between enjoying it and not enjoying retirement.
So here's another one, not being complacent. And what if you were to forecast a market downturn? So we could simulate this in the plan, but if you were to do this, just take your initial assets and decrease them by 40%. Now, we've got some really cool tools because in addition to the financial plan we use, we're using a tool that's, again, we pay for, and these things cost money. It's called Hidden Levers. And that takes 60 up to 60 headline different items and says, okay, well, what happens if there's unrest like we're experiencing right now in the Middle East, and what impact does that have? And we can simulate that against your portfolio. And why? Because there's nothing new under the sun. And it's not exact, but I'm going to tell you what's pretty darn close. And it can tell us exactly what impacts your portfolio with that particular event, or a positive one. We rebound. The economy gets back on track, and how's that? Well, that's going to be far less damaging than obviously a negative.
Yep.
So they're not all negative, but it's a really cool tool, and we can stress. But if you're out there doing this on your own, just simulate that yourself and say, okay, if I took a 40% hit, not that I want to, but then you need to be looking at the risk and reward in your portfolios and testing with tools like we're using. And it's kind of crazy. I know we pay tens of thousands of dollars for the programs we use. And it doesn't make sense for a lot of you to do that because if you're not doing it professionally. But it's again, it's kind of like the doctor's got those cool equipment, and I just came from the dentist yesterday, so they got some cool stuff there. Wouldn't make sense for me to own all that though. But I think that's one of those things that's going to tell you. You look at these kind of things, and it's how did your plan hold up? You know, did you run out of money? And what happens? And again, we just did a program this week, and we hope to get those back live again, and we can WebEx those. But we had 2 speakers in this week on Alzheimer's, and I think you heard one of those presentations. That's a little frightening, that how rapidly that's growing. And that there is no cure for it.
Nope.
And we are spending, even though heart disease certainly and cancer and those things are certainly killers, they are weakening in terms of, I don't want to say they're dropping in terms of the mortality rates that it's causing. However, Alzheimer's is on the rise, and we're spending a fraction. You know, and in the fact that it can hit any person at any
Almost
age.
at any age, yep.
Yes, we used to think of it was just, they used to call it old timers instead of Alzheimer's. You know, and it's not an old person disease. My mother personally had that, and you know that I managed her care, and that eventually she forgot how to breathe. Mm-hmm. I mean, that sounds very harsh, and it was hard to watch my mom go through that, but managing her care and the expense of that is immense.
Yeah.
So you start to put that into a plan and say, okay, well, we did a show a few weeks ago that said, read statistics, what is $318,000 that the average couple, and again, there are no averages, but about $318,000 in additional out-of-pocket expenses that you can account for this.
Yep.
The question is, are you going to be self-insured? Do you need to get one of these long-term care alternative type policies or traditional long-term care, stuff that our partners deal with? But we also did a class this week on that, you know, to kind of educate people, make them aware so they can plan. Again, planning this stuff in advance makes a lot more sense than waiting till after the damage is done. And again, I'll quote one of the people we follow, Michael Guyad, who described, you know, most people in an accident situation, Eric, are hitting the brakes after the motion of the accident's already taken place. You're not going to stop it. Then it's too late. So that's not the time to be looking at that. You know, now's the time to be looking at it, stress testing it so that you make sure that you're covering. So again, I think that rule, don't be complacent. The second one, you know, don't get discouraged. You know, just like complacency lulls people into inaction, you know, feeling overly discouraged and overwhelmed can have the same effect. Mm-hmm. So let's not make mountains out of molehills. Yep. And I'm always been a person, let's jump in and let me look at it and see it for what it is. Maybe it really is as bad as what I thought it was.
Yeah, and it's not, you know, if you're 50 years old and you have 200,000 and your goal is to get $1 million in 5 years, that might be unrealistic. So don't set that expectation. You know, if you set it too high or too far, you kind of shut down because you understand it's impossible. I want to get there.
In an interactive plan like what we use, you know, you can see, maybe you see that your picture isn't as dire, and how many times do we see? And there is nothing more gratifying than that, is there? Mm-mm. We sit down with somebody and you say, hey, we go through the numbers and we make sure they're right. And we see the plan, which is no guarantee, but it's a pretty good assurance that gives you an idea from some scientific approach that's objective that tells us that you're on track. And then we see people retire. And I'm going to tell you what, I love that. I live for that.
Mm-hmm.
I live for that, to help make other people wealthy, to help them use their wealth and enjoy it, to realize their dreams. And if they want to pass it on to their loved ones when they're gone, I mean, that's what we live for. We live and breathe that. That's our passion. So, we're going to get into a little more depth here in the next part of the show as we talk about verifying some numbers. Looking at all the sources of income. If you're under Social Security, we're going to talk about the things you need to be looking for there. The numbers in consider an above average life expectancy.
Yep.
Look at all your outside assets. Those are going to be some of the things we're going to cover in the next part of the show. You're going to want to be sure, what's our giveaway today, Eric? Are you feeling generous?
I am feeling generous. It's Friday. It's not 5 o'clock yet, but it is Friday. So we are going to feel generous today. And our giveaway is we're going to offer a free stress test to either your portfolio or your situation, meaning your retirement situation. Stress test. Show you what can happen, what could happen, and what maybe can't happen, and what you can and can't afford.
Now, if somebody walked in off the street, there'd be a minimum fee that we would charge of $500 just for our time. Not making money on that. We just charge our time. We're absolutely going to do that for free because we want you to see this. We want you to see this, not somebody else's situation or what you read in the magazine or you saw on CNBC, and hey, I just need to replace a 80% of my income rule. But to really look at this and really stress test it with all the scientific tools that we're able to use for you to help you get a clear picture, because we're pretty confident that if you can see what's broken, we'd love to be part of the solution, but at least, we're going to help you see that.
Yep.
So call in at 513-454-9999. Visit us on the web at straighttalkcleardecisions.com. You can sign up for there, get educational pieces, but that's you can call in and ask us, and we'll do that.
Yep, or if you're already on social media, go to our Facebook page, Rick Saylor Financial, and ask for the free offer right there. Follow us, and if you're on Twitter, tweet it out, and we'll go ahead and make sure we get you our free giveaway. It is Friday.
Well, stay tuned for the next part of the show and the numbers. You're listening to the Straight Talk Clear Decisions radio show with your no-nonsense host, Rick Saylor
And Eric Hamburg.
Money is an awesome thing if you know how to handle it, the joy it brings.
Hey, have you heard about the new long-term care alternatives? Many of you may know how I managed my mother's care, and I took her through her money in the spend down, into the veterans benefits. My father was a 2-time Korean War vet, and right into the Medicaid. She started out at $2,700 a month in assisted living, and at the end of her life, 2 years later, was over $8,000. The three concerns I hear the most about long-term care insurance protection is that it's expensive, the premiums are rising, and I may never use it. Well, why don't you try what I did? I bought a life insurance long-term care. They can't cancel me, the premiums can never go up, and oh yeah, I can spend that death benefit before I die if I'm critically, chronically, or terminally ill. Be sure and ask your advisor today.
Rick Saylor, smooth financial sailing for the best part of your life.
Well, you're listening to the Straight Talk Clear Decisions radio show with your Transparent Wealth Management host, Rick Saylor.
And Eric Hamburg.
So we're on this topic, Erica, planning for your retirement and the what ifs. So we promised our listeners 12, and we got some work to do here for the end of the show. And how to protect your savings from unwanted financial surprises. Well, a couple general guidelines here that I'd just like to throw out is think of this. How about writing a job description for your investments? So it's just like you would look at a job that you would be doing, and with that detail, why don't you write one for your plan to see what you expect all these different pieces to be doing in relationship to the overall picture?
And there are a couple different pieces you want in that job description of your investments. The first one is get clear on what your goals are. So this is the first thing I would say you must do in order to understand your goals. I like the idea of writing a job description for your investments. So it's, by I say goals, is what's the goal of that money? Is the goal of that money to generate income for yourself at age 60? Or is that goal of your money not to touch until age 70, or maybe not even to touch at all, so you're more worried about capital appreciation? Because you might hear the term capital appreciation or dividends and income, but in the investing world, different investments make up different pieces of those, and then not the same investment for capital appreciation is going to be able to generate the same income if you're looking to generate income off of it.
So let's just hit these as a highlight. We've got get clear on what your goals are. I think the general rule for goals are they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable, they need to be reasonable, and they need to be time sensitive. The acronym is SMART. So be specific with that, just like you would set personal goals, set what your financial goals are. The second one, or the third one down here, evaluate the most effective solutions. Now, if you haven't done number one or number two there, you're not going to be able to do number three.
Nope.
So, there's an order to the universe. And so as you start to look at these, because realize this, you're not the first one to ever go down this path of looking and seeking out financial independence and accumulating wealth and planning this out. So copy success, copy what the successful people have done. And again, we've seen a lot of people successfully do that.
Yep.
So rely on us.
The last one here, it's begin a transition plan. And this is probably going to be the most difficult one for anybody to follow. It's taking the action. You've written it down. You know what now you have to do it. And by doing it is, by continuing to monitoring it and making sure that transition, your goal is actually working for you. And if not, we need to maybe change it up.
So let's jump into some numbers. We've covered the first two. Don't be complacent. Don't get discouraged. Well, how about 3 through 6? Verify the Social Security numbers. Well, there's a number of things here. Make sure your record's correct. You can go online.
What do you mean by record, Rick?
Well, everybody who pays into Social Security, Eric, has got a Social Security record. You want to make sure they're not missing earnings. There's no zeros where you should have earnings, that kind of thing. Because if you don't correct it, they're just going to calculate it off of misinformation. And when I first started my career, there were millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in uncredited earnings that people hadn't taken credit for. And it was just, and if you don't correct it, it's kind of like Napoleonic law. You're guilty till you prove yourself innocent. You're wrong. You got to prove yourself right. The second thing I'm going to say is start getting that record and looking at the estimates on what you can expect to get out of this, because there is a substantial difference. Let's say if you're born between 1943 and 1954, your full Social Security age is 66. Well, if you go early at 62, there is a substantial cut. Costs you 25% every year for life. And then you go all the way up to age 70. So that range, by waiting, you get 8% more per income per year for the rest of your life, 67, 68, 69 to 70. So it's 32% more. Now you look at that contrast between age 62 and 70, 57% difference. That's a game changer. Social Security is not a joke. It's a source of income. And you got to look at the numbers. You got to verify. You got to find out what's right for your situation. If you say, hey, my wife and I aren't in the greatest of health, that's a different scenario. Mm-hmm. All these things come into play, and when you're actually, we can optimize it for you. We got a program that does that, and it'll spit that out.
And that's what that next one does. So it's factor in all other sources of income. So looking at
let me touch on one other thing on Social Security, because there's really three areas you're looking at. It's not just retirement, it's not just spousal benefit, and it's not just survivor benefit. There's 3 dimensions to that. And what is there? 3,172 different combinations.
Yeah,
it's off the chart.
So when you look at Social Security, it's great. We can show you, all this big benefit of you deferring it, but you have to look at your other sources of income. If you have other income, if you have other investments, and you're in relatively good health, it could benefit you by delaying Social Security. However, if you're in the boat and you're saying, I don't have anything else to generate income out of, it might not be feasible for you to delay it. So, your brothers or your sisters or your neighbors' plan could be totally different, and just because they drew Social Security at 62 doesn't mean you have to, or it's going to be right for you. It's looking at your income, your scenario, not what somebody else told you they did.
And we did a show. There were several shows back, and there's a good article on that, and it's on the Morningstar State website. Is that who produced that? It's called Alpha, Beta, Now Gamma. And the short version is when you're just managing risk, which is the alpha beta, that's upside downside in portfolios and the risk factors. Gamma was that extra component that said, okay, well, what if you used dynamic withdrawal strategies? You were looking at the accounts, and when you draw smart withdrawals, you're drawing from the up accounts, not the down ones, because it does less damage. Mm-hmm. And what if you use an annuity in your portfolio, that's going to guarantee an income stream. All those things come into play. What if you use Social Security and you optimize that? That gamma component adds to the plus side of the equation and the probability of success. Not guaranteeing, but it's better because there's things we don't know. Now, one of the things to consider, I think, in numbers, Eric, and I think we see this far too often, people just don't think they're going to live that long. But like that famous quote, anonymous, whoever it was, that said, if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. Right? And I just taught the class, just opened the class in my first week, and I said, if an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Eat right, eat better, exercise, keep moving, all those things that we know we should be doing. If you want to take supplements, I take supplements. I mean, there's a number of things that you can be doing to increase your probability and decrease the cost and be proactive in that. But I think, as we live longer lives, that's something just as a reality. That's a factor that could cause a significant change. And here the example is, look at considering 50% chance that you're going to live longer and above the 50% of the average health group.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying use age 90. There's good odds that one of you are going to live 90 years. If you're a couple and you're a baby boomer, why not use 100?
Yep. And especially looking at your own life expectancy, look at your family. How long have your parents lived? How long have your brothers and sisters lived? If all of them have lived well into their 80s, 90s, we're not saying you're going to live that long, but you better prepare for it because it's happened, and vice versa. If your parents and if your siblings haven't lived that long, but maybe cancer runs in your family or something like that, we're not saying you're going to live a short life, but maybe it might not be to your advantage to draw Social Security at age 70. So it's taking in the variables. It's making the best guesstimate.
It's going to impact those decisions.
Correct.
Isn't it? Well, consider adding in outside assets. You know what your investments are, but are you really looking at things like your 401k and your employer's plan, retirement accounts from previous jobs, IRAs and other investment accounts for retirement? Well, consider this. And if you've got stranded 401ks and 403bs and deferred comp plans out there, hey, those could be idle assets. And it's not okay to put those on cruise control. We may be in this benign period of volatility, but let me assure you it's coming back. And just to leave those in there and say, hey, if it drops, it'll come back. I'm going to tell you what, you need to be proactively looking at it because it could be a game changer for you. On that piece, Eric, why don't we consider changing your investment allocation?
Correct, and that kind of goes hand in hand. Investment allocation. Certain investments are going to perform well in certain situations. Meaning, one of the biggest things a lot of people overlook is, majority of your money is in your IRA or 401k. Well, that means every single withdrawal you take out of there is going to be taxable. If you can have certain investments that perform well in tax-deferred investments and others that perform well in taxable, take advantage of it. If certain companies pay out big dividends, on a quarterly basis or monthly basis, and that's capped at a 15% dividends bracket, if that's where your income is, maybe you use that money for income and not put it in something capital preservation. So your investment allocation, it's kind of more important today than ever because taxes could erode a good chunk of where your income comes from.
So here's one that, and we're all married, so if you're married, don't forget your spouse. That could be trouble. Now, what are we talking about there? Well, how about the survivor benefits on pensions? How about the spousal benefits in terms of how healthcare coverage is? How about the survivor benefit on Social Security and how that's impacted by when you draw? Mm-hmm. All those things that come in, and these are big deal breakers.
Yeah, Social
and
Security
game changers
especially
if you do it right.
Yep.
But look at it ahead of time where you've got some time to rechart a new course. Well, I think one of the best things that we see and we encourage people to do, Eric, is figure out how much. Let's begin with the end in mind. Figure out how much income you really need. And again, what are we talking about? Every retirement plan is unique, like a fingerprint. So your dreams, your visions, your values, your goals. That's going to be different than everybody else. And put that in there and let that determine. Don't use these general guidelines, 70%. 80% of your final working income. Maybe you need more, maybe you need less. But I'm going to encourage you because that's going to affect number 10.
Yep.
Check the withdrawal rate. You've heard this idea that 4% is what you can take off. I'm telling you, that's outdated. Maybe you can take more. Maybe you got to take less.
Yep. You know,
Because that's the deal that can make you run out.
that's right. And if you're just on a cruise control 4%, well, 4% might be okay when the market's going up. But if you're still withdrawing that same dollar figure when your portfolio is down, you're actually going to be taking more than 4%. So it's being, it's watching it and monitoring it and making sure you're still drawing the right amount.
Well, and I think as we look at that and we're adjusting our sales, to use the metaphor of Rick Saylor Financial, make the changes that are necessary. Don't wait, until that last moment where you don't have as many, what I want to say, options available. Because again, what can you do? You can work longer. You can save more. You can take more investment risk, although that may not be as fun outside your comfort range, because it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more return from that. You could cut your expenses. That doesn't sound like much fun. Or you could just say, hey, kids, we love you, but. So I think the final one is, just because you did this, don't get it and forget it. Don't do it and forget it. You got to revisit it at least once a year. At least once a year.
Yep. And make changes if necessary.
Yes. So take us up on the offer. It's a great value. It's free to you. Absolutely free. We're going to stress test your portfolio and your holdings and your financial plan in whatever dimension it needs to be done. And all you have to do is contact us. You can contact us at 513-454-9999, 24 hours a day. Send us an email at info@Straight Talk Clear Decisions, or visit our website and contact us there. You can sign up for our free e-newsletter and some other things and
Yep.
get engaged.
Visit our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter, and we'll be happy to get this free information out to you. It's another day,
Eric,
another show.
It is, absolutely, and warmth is coming next week. So you're listening to the Straight Talk Clear Decisions radio show. Thank you for joining us with your host, Rick Saylor
And Eric Hamburg.